On November 21st, 1992, Tom Monfils disappeared after a workplace dispute. A day later, his body was found in a pulp vat with a 50-pound weight wrapped around his neck. Over 30 years later, exactly who killed Monfils remains a mystery. Welcome to the Monfils 6 podcast. My name is Damon Schneider.
And this is Mike Putchell.
Tonight's episode is entitled, That's a Wrap, as we will be wrapping up the Monfils Conspiracy book by Dennis Gulkson and John Gay. We have a few more letters to read. So this is Mike Hearn speaks. I am proof that innocent people go to prison. I did not commit, nor do I have any knowledge of this crime. My family and friends are also victims of this crime because I was taken away from them. The public and community have a right to know the truth. My son has grown up without really knowing his father. He is lost out on my companionship. I would like people to know that even though the justice system has failed in this case, I believe the truth will set me free. I'd like the public to know I took 4 polygraph tests and passed them all, but they are not admissible in court. The public needs to be more educated about the prison system because it is becoming a business for the state of Wisconsin. And finally, what the judge said to me at sentencing was, this is the first chapter in a book whose ending has yet to be written. I understand that the Green Bay Police Department and the DA don't want the truth to come out because it would show how inept they are. Let's right the wrong that has gone on since 1995. So in terms of Mike's letter, Mike Hearn's letter, what did you think about the judge saying that this is the first chapter in a book whose ending has yet to be written?
That's a line that the authors have referenced quite often as well, because I know I've read that a few times. And it's an interesting thing to say. Certainly it stuck with him. What's your take on that? Why that stuck out to him?
Oh, just I guess he was trying to be encouraging, the judge, but it just seems like such a dark moment that why would you try to offer up words of encouragement at that really dark moment?
Well, to me, what I also take from there is if the judge is saying that it's something that's yet to be written, I mean, I get obviously nothing is written. We don't know the future of anything, but it almost makes it sound like that was like kind of like new territory as far as the basis under how they were convicted. And we were kind of just going into this a little bit before recording. We know that judge didn't really see a lot of firm ground under which they were convicted. He was a little skeptical of this whole trial. So I think that does kind of say a lot, that the judge didn't even really know where that was going to go. Maybe he foresaw multiple appeals being granted.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe he did see cracks and knew that this is a story that wasn't going away for any time soon, for sure.
Yeah.
So now you have a letter from Mike Hearn's mother and stepfather?
Yes. So this is Trudy and Mike. I don't know how to say their last name. What do you think?
Dalebro?
Okay. And again, this is Mike Hearn's mother and stepfather. They say, I really do not know how to start this letter because everything involved in this travesty has been so devastating on our family. Just where does one begin with a story this unbelievable? I guess I'll start by saying I am Michael's stepfather. I came into his life when he was only 7 years old. Since I've known Michael, I have learned of his deep love of all life, of all creatures and mankind. I know deep in his heart he would never harm or murder anyone for any reason. He is not a violent person. All of his loves he planned to share with his son, who was born in 1991. Michael doted over his son and looked forward to a life full of teaching him all about life and about the outdoors. This dream was taken away from Michael when he was falsely accused of and found guilty of a crime he was not a part of. His son is 15 and in high school. He is a young man now. They've already lost more than 14 years. He was 3 years old when his father was taken from him. Michael's mom's health has become very delicate over the years of his incarceration. She has lost most of her eyesight and needs a wheelchair to get around. His grandmother, who was like a second mom to Michael, is 92 and has failing health. Our income is limited, so not only are the long trips to see Michael hard on his mom and grandmother physically, it is devastating to the family budget as well. Faith is our only hope. We have faith in our son because we know that he is completely innocent. We hope that when the information is in this book is published, there will be an outcry for justice. We pray for the day when we can be together again as a family.
Uh, what stood out in this letter to you?
The the relationship that never existed with the son, uh, and that's just a real tragedy. I mean, I hope now they've been able to connect, but I mean, obviously you can't make up for. I mean, this is the whole son's childhood, the whole son's young adulthood is over already, and the chance to have a normal father son relationship is long gone. So it's just a shame that that was like that, because I know Mike Hearn was the youngest of the six, and so his kid was the youngest of everybody else's kids.
Yeah, what stood out to me was just when they were talking about making the trip to see him in prison and how that was sort of difficult. A lot of these people were in different states, and so they would have to. Yeah, those trips no doubt could have been very very long and expensive, as they say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Memento mori. Remember, you must die someday. However, your life can be remembered forever by contacting us at seasonsoflifememorials.com. We are here to teach you how to create a film about your life that can be seen at your future gravesite as well as within the obituary section of your very own newspaper. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com. So, as we record this, a pretty historic event just recently occurred, and that would be the wildfires in Los Angeles area. Mike, did you want to just talk a little bit about how Seasons of Life Memorials could have maybe saved some of those memories?
Sure. And I mean, and in some ways it still can, to a point. I'll talk about that. So we know that it's still going on right now as we speak on uh, January 11th as we're recording this. Uh, and doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. So um, we've talked before about how disasters like this, like fires and floods, are just terrible with losing photographs and just treasures that people have relating to memories of their family and friends and just family histories in general. And we've seen from the coverage that that's the case. I mean, people are losing their entire homes, and a lot of times they're leaving quickly in a matter of just a few minutes. They have to get out of there, and a lot of times they're not taking the pictures and things like that. They're taking just family members, pets, clothing, and things like that. Uh, so your point about what Seasons of Life would do in this situation is that this is the perfect example of where working with us is really a kind of a lifesaver in a matter of speaking. Um, we know that it would be something you wouldn't have to worry about at all if you had the photographs backed up either on the social media channels, as we've talked about, or you've done like a legacy um, video where you want to memorialize yourself ahead of time before you even pass on. Uh, those things would be documented and up online, where obviously a fire wouldn't be able to take those away. They'd still be there no matter where you are. And the reason I said that there's still a chance is that even if somebody would lose their photos now, like let's say in the fires uh, out there, just even from any disaster right now, uh, we could still do the podcast idea where people would talk about the memories that they have that are fresh in their minds right now. That still is an option. We wouldn't have the photographs, of course, but uh, it would still be an opportunity to do a podcast where you'd share the memories and talk about those people now while they're in your mind, rather than 20 years from now when the person would maybe pass on and you don't remember those stories anymore.
And we're back. So this is a letter from Mike Hearn's father, stepmother, and half brothers, Garth, Georgie, and Zach Hearn. We've been asked to write about how our lives have been affected by the arrest, trial, and wrongful conviction of our son and brother, Michael Hearn. How does the average family do that and reach out to readers and make them realize there is something terribly wrong, that an innocent man is behind bars in prison? We live with the same stages as dying people. The people close to them go through. For us, these stages are present every day: denial, anger, bargaining, and depression. Some days the pain subsides. Then another eruption of anguish takes you to your knees, and all the stages come rushing through you at once until the only help is falling to the ground in a throbbing numbness. There is a fifth stage that is still far out of our family's reach: acceptance. Mike's ill-founded conviction and his tragic incarceration are very real, and yet we have gone on resembling something of a normal life. After 14 years of this indescribable pain, our prayers remain the same. We pray the Lord will open eyes and the truth will be found. We pray that Mike is soon released. So what did you think about what sort of image they paint of someone just falling to their knees into the ground in throbbing numbness?
I think they'd made a good impression of the stages that they've been dealing with. I I mean, I can already imagine uh, kind of that would be what you'd be going through, all those different stages. But I mean, they made it clear in the letter that this is hell for everybody uh, going through this, for the family and friends of these convicted.
And now you have a letter from Ray Moore.
The thing that amazes me about this case is how quickly people put aside common sense to buy all of this. They never stop to think that the police might have made a mistake. They accept that 6 people who did not really know each other could do all of this in a short time without leaving any physical evidence. As the state's witnesses have said, quote, nothing was out of place, unquote. Given all of this, the hardest part has been, what has this done to my children? I had 4 wonderful, bright, and trusting kids. The ones at home were A and B students. After this happened, their lives were turned upside down. They no longer are the beautiful, free spirits they once were. They are only a shell of their former selves. Depression has set in, and I don't know if they will ever overcome it. To see what this injustice has done to my children is just ripping my heart out. I know one day God will vindicate my children, and that is what I hang my hope on. I would like the people to read the trial transcripts and to not make up their minds on bits and pieces.
So what stood out to me with Ray's letter would be I get just how difficult it was on his children. He mentions that a depression had set in and he wasn't sure if they would ever overcome it. Um, that really goes to show just how the great reach that this case had and how many lives it affected. What stood out in the letter to you, Mike?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd say that's the similar thing that struck me uh, is that it's kind of like what happens when a family member, a parent, I should say, suddenly dies. A lot of times the family kind of falls apart as a result of that, and that's kind of what this reminds me of is, and that's kind of what it was. I mean, it is they're completely just gone. They're not able to be present in the family, and that's it's devastating.
So now a letter from Raymor's daughter, Ivy Summers. Write a letter explaining how my father's wrongful conviction affected me and my family. Yeah, like that is even possible. The effects of that conviction burn today as though he were convicted yesterday. The pain, heartache, humiliation, shame, loneliness, and despair are feelings that cannot be put on paper. I cannot tell you the joy I saw in his eyes when he saw me graduate from high school. I cannot tell you what he wore on my wedding day. I cannot tell you how it felt when he came to the hospital when his first grandchild was born. Those memories were taken from me. Those memories do not exist. My father has missed so much of our lives that it is something that cannot be given back to us. My family looks to the future as the past is just too painful. My family is waiting for the day my father can come home so we can start our lives again with him again. So, what stood out in terms of Ivy's letter?
Well, just kind of going over everything that was missed. I mean, so many life milestones were uh, not involving him. And again, those are once in a lifetime events. They can't be recreated. You can share them with him through photos and talk with him about it, about describe what it was like, but of course that doesn't replace actually having him there. So, and just the idea that knowing that he could have been there to see all of that, but was forced not to be there, is just even more troubling, more sad.
So now finally a letter from Ray Moore's friend, Sammy Lee Phillips.
I have known Ray Moore for over 25 years, longer than I have known anyone outside of a relative. During this time, Ray has shown himself to be a wise and caring father, a thoughtful and loving husband, and an active and generous member of his church and community. Ray has given freely of himself to the professional and political organizations and remains a steadfast, true friend to me now, and I expect will forever. Ray is a good man and a quality person, a far cry from the murderous conspirator he's convicted of being. While it is by no means a new house in which they lived, Ray took great pride in home ownership in the little Shangri-La they created for themselves in their little own yard. And so in light of all of this, of the loving family and friends, the rewards of his work and sense of fulfillment and contentment, one may be drawn to ask, why would Ray throw all of this away? Well, I have an answer. He didn't relinquish it. It was taken from him. However, all hope is not lost. There are things that you can do, dear reader. You can fight ignorance and complacency. Now that you have read this book, pass it on and in that way share the knowledge with others. Having said all this, I find myself thinking of Tom Monfils' family and their suffering. I at least have a hope, however small, that I may see Ray again, but they can have no such hope, for their loved one is gone forever. How can there be a future without hope? How can there be hope without a future? Let us hope for a future that has justice for Ray and Tom. What's remembered lives. Losing someone precious from our lives is the most painful event that one can endure. Seasons of Life Memorials is dedicated to making sure the person you lost is never forgotten. We work with you to help you craft a film about your loved one's life that can be viewed at the gravesite. We can also help you create a film about your very own life that can be viewed in the obituary section of your hometown newspaper. Imagine that, your friends, relatives, and neighbors viewing your own unique story and how your life truly did matter. Visit our website, seasonsoflifememorials.com, and follow us on social media today to start viewing what we can do for you.
And so that concludes the letters. So the authors point out, again, at the time this book was written or published, it was 2009, so 5 of them still were in prison. There are 5 men convicted for murder and still behind bars who must be exonerated. At the very least, they must be retried separately, along with the already absolved Mike Pye. They are innocent. This is the truth, however blasphemous the Green Bay Police Department and Brown County DA and others want to shade it. This book has been a long time coming, far too long for Tom Monfils, who was the first victim, and for these 6 innocent men. With the publication, these authors rededicate themselves to securing final justice for all of them. And then they go on to say, the very first night that they went into prison, according to Lieutenant Steve Henry of the Green Bay Police Department, some of the men asked to be moved to different cell blocks away from the others. In fact, jail worker Jim Klorski told Green Bay Press-Gazette worker Dan Landenkamp that Keith Kutzka asked me to get Dale Bastian away from him. Nobody wants to be with Dale Bastian. And Mike Hearn told me he doesn't want to be near any of those guys. Based on his interviews with the jail staff, Langenkamp labeled this episode a jailhouse feud. So, what do you think that says that the very first night that they were locked away, they basically didn't want to be near each other?
I actually was a little sad to read that story just because I understand my take is they probably didn't want to be near each other just because they don't want to have anything to do with this case. Uh, but at the same time, it's like I believe they all know that each other is innocent. I'm pretty sure. I don't believe anybody actually suspected any of them of doing anything. Uh, so it's a little bit sad that they kind of went that way towards each other, but I can understand it to a point. But ultimately, the reason it's a little sad is that they're all in the same boat. So, uh, but again, I can understand why you'd want to just you probably would lose all hope at that point and just want nothing to do with anybody.
The authors state that even if one believed in the Union conspiracy, the following seemed clear. That night, with the men confronting the reality of their guilty verdicts and facing uncertainty of years in prison and angry with their so-called fellow conspirators, this alleged conspiracy disintegrated into 6 very solitary pieces. Here they were, convicted and incarcerated, demanding to be separated from one another. If they had ever been hiding the truth, it would have come out that night in jail. If they were angry, guilty men, someone would have sung like a canary. Mike Pye was quoted as saying, "I was scared to death about what one of the other guys might make up just to save his skin." No one decided to rat out his fellow comrades. Amazing, unless there was never a conspiracy in the first place. So, what do you think about the fact that that night, that very first night, someone would have sung like a canary, as they say?
Yeah, I think somebody would have done that even before that night if they really knew something. Uh, but they didn't. And I think also they're not there's a lot to be said here about the character of everybody because nobody was making anything up. Nobody really ever even attempted to make up something.
The author stated if you still believe these 6 men were a part of a Union conspiracy, you'd have to admit to wondering how this alleged conspiracy has lasted this long. D.A. Sakowski, an ardent supporter of the conspiracy myth, was asked why the so-called conspirators have kept their quiet after so many years. Sakowski said, "I think they are so invested in this lie at this point they can't come forward. They would embarrass themselves in front of their friends and family." Sakowski's line of reasoning is astonishing. Their families have already suffered in every conceivable way, financially, socially, emotionally. There's not much more for further embarrassment. So what do you think about that point? Because I think that is sort of, I don't see how Sakowski answers that.
I actually think that a lot of times when people give an answer, it's almost like subconsciously that's how he's explaining his own behavior with how he's able to keep propping up the convictions is that he is getting to the point well now certainly but even back then where he would be embarrassed to admit that the case was flimsy, the case was weak. I actually think in some ways that's the real question he's answering is why won't he admit any wrongdoing or flaws in his own prosecution?
Yeah, that's a good point. In 2004, Mike Johnson put it this way: "You think I haven't thought about calling John Sakowski and say, 'Hey, John, I want to talk'? I could do that. I could invent a story." When asked why he did not, Johnson pointed toward the heaven and said, "Because that would be a lie, and I'd have to square that lie with him." So, what did you think about Mike Johnson, pointing a finger towards heaven and saying, "I'd have to square that basically with God"?
Well, we know Mike Johnson was probably the most devout in his religion and his faith, so it wasn't surprising for him to bring that up. But I think that it shows that with him, and I think really with everybody, uh, they had strong values. And whether they all had those values because of religion or just their own values, their own ways of conducting themselves, they all valued telling the truth. And that's why their stories never changed.
Dale Bastian, Keith Kutzko, Mike Johnson, Mike Kern, and Ray Moore all know that they will never be released from prison under their current circumstances. To a man, they have told these authors that they will never admit to having anything to have done to have harmed Tom Monfils, because they did not. Guilty men would have admitted their guilt at their very first parole hearing, knowing that that was their only ticket out. These men have said repeatedly that they cannot and will not do that. That each of them would rather die an old man in prison than be unfaithful to the truth of their innocence. So, what about that aspect? The fact that they're going to have these parole hearings throughout the years, and they're going to be asked to reflect on their guilt. I think that's sort of the first thing that a parole board wants to hear, and they just can't admit it because they can't lie and say that they were guilty of doing something they didn't.
Yeah, and that's a real tough situation. Evidently, things must have changed, though, because we know that they are out. And I don't know, was that not no longer a parameter of being released?
That's a good question. Maybe after a long enough time period passes that they're just sort of everyone's just sort of released. What about the fact that Mike Pye was released early? Do you think that he felt any guilt that the other men sat in prison for so much longer than he did?
Maybe, he could have, but I also would say maybe not, though, because he had nothing to do with that. And as we've talked about, these guys didn't really even have anything to do with each other before the trial, before the death of Tom Monfils. So I don't know if they really feel connected with each other, even though they share this story. But that would be something really interesting to know from talking with them or learning about it somehow through their family or how they're feeling now. So I don't know. I could see somebody maybe feeling guilty, but I could also see him not feeling that way. But it shows you too that he, with his participation in the book, I mean, and in other things, he's been very vocal for getting them out of there and getting them, maybe not getting them out of there, but showing that this trial was wrong, this conviction was wrong. So he clearly feels motivated. I don't know if it's out of guilt, but he feels motivated to get this corrected.
New episodes of the Monfils 6 podcast drop every other Friday. Please join us again. Thanks for listening.
Have you recently lost a loved one and want to hold on to their memory forever? We create individual and unique video-based obituaries that will allow anyone reading your local newspaper or visiting the gravesite to view the video and your memories of the loved one. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com.